Mr. Arndt,
Present.
Mr. Dana,
Present.
Ms. Fisher,
Here,
Mrs. Metzler,
Here.
and Mrs. Ortiz.
we in compliance?
Yes, we are.
Stand for the pledge, please.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there any correspondence?
Yes, I have one this evening. This is from Seeds Orthopedic and Sports Medicine from February 19, 2021. Dear School Board, Seeds Orthopedics offered student athletic sport physicals at the cost of $10 each, and I would like to donate $9 for each sport physical we perform back to the Geneva Athletic Boosters. It's my pleasure to donate this money back. January 2020 through December 2020, we performed 21 athletic sport physicals from your school. A check in the amount of $189 was mailed to your athletic boosters. Thank you, Dr. Seeds.
Agenda modification.
We do not have any agenda modifications, but I did want to note just a couple items. On page 3, we had an incorrect date. We didn't make a modification for that, just changing it to 2020-21. It's on the agenda that I provided to you. And then the last 3 numbers on page 6 should be 10, 11, and 12 for other hearing of the public and the executive session.
All right. Hearing of the public. If there's anyone that would like to make a comment at this time, please start by stating your name and address. Okay, moving on. Item H, the approval of the minutes from the prior meeting.
I'll move.
And just for purposes of a change, I would just request a change on page 9, the middle of the page regarding early graduation. I just want to make it note that each time we have someone who graduates early, typically speaking, they come and they talk about what their future plans are. That's something that I was asked and I did not have in the copies. I recognize I was at this meeting via Zoom and not in person. But I know what one of the students is doing, but I didn't know what the other student was doing, and I just wanted the minutes to reflect that.
Okay.
Just check that the motion and second were as amended.
Okay, you're voting on the motion as amended?
No,
I'll
you
move
just
as
agree
amended.
that you're okay.
Okay. Roll call.
Mr. Arndt,
Yes.
Mr. Dana,
Yes.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler,
Yes.
and Mrs. Ortiz.
Okay, item I, Treasurer's Financial Report.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Dana,
Yes.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler,
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz, and Mr. Arndt.
Yes.
Approval of invoices.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler,
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz, Mr. Arndt,
Yes.
and Mr. Dana.
Yes.
Item K, informational items.
You see listed here, well, you have the investment report again. Not too many changes there. Rates are bumping up a little, and we're not sure how long that will last. On the donation side, so far, the district has received $13,310 from various donors per the attached list. So you have in your attachments at the back of your agenda, the list of donors through March 12th, when the agenda was sent out. And this is to the Mark Gray Sports Pay to Participate Fund. So there's a lengthy list of donors. Hopefully you had a chance to look that over. But again, the donations through March 12th totaled $13,310, and that money is to be used to help reduce the cost of pay to participate to students that are in need. Yes, sir.
Is this the P2P fund? That's a local fund just for Geneva area sports?
If you recall, we just set that up at the last board meeting, so it's on your minutes. We set that up under funds. This was at the request of the Brace family, and they put that in the obituary for Mark Brace and asked that donations be made to Geneva area city schools. So we set up a separate fund to account for those monies, and then they will be applied from that fund to the general fund as directed by the athletic director when they use that to help with pay to participate reductions to those fees. So it is a local fund set up at the request of the family.
So 3.5 pages of people that donated in what period of time?
Beginning February 19th, which was a day or two, I think, after the obituary was in the newspaper, through March 12th.
That's very impressive.
Yes,
Thank you.
sure.
So Mark was loved by many, and wow, that is just absolutely unbelievable. We are so blessed to live in a very caring community. Also a shout out here to Dr. Seeds as well for his contribution to us here. But I know, Eric, that you'll send off a letter here to the family, thanking them. Just absolutely incredible, the support given here to our students. So thank you to everyone.
Anything else, Kevin?
That's it.
Legislative report.
Thank you. In the last month, many hearings and sponsor testimony have been held in committee on education-related bills that I have mentioned in previous legislative reports. Some bills have passed out of committee and are moving on for further action. The Fair School Funding Plan, introduced as House Bill 1, has become the top priority for the House in the 134th General Assembly. Hearings and testimony are already underway, and it is expected that the bill will be passed by the House this month and that House Bill 1 will be included in the House version of the budget bill, House Bill 110. The United States Department of Education sent a letter to the chief state school officers that provided guidance on federal assessments. The letter indicated that federal assessments are still required, but the U.S. Department of Education would provide states with flexibilities, including administering a shortened version of the statewide assessments, offering remote administration, and extending the testing window. The letter stressed the importance of these assessments as a tool for understanding the impact that the pandemic has had on learning and to help identify the necessary resources and supports needed. There have been a number of bills introduced this year regarding testing in our state, including House Bill 67, which in light of this letter was substantially amended prior to the House passage. It has moved to the Senate, where just yesterday it was passed by the Senate Primary and Secondary Education Committee. If the Senate passed the bill today, because they were planning on having a hearing and a vote today, and the House concurs with the Senate amendments, the bill could reach the governor this week. It appears that House Bill 436, signed into law in early January regarding dyslexia screening in our schools, will impose significant new requirements on all school districts beginning with the 22-23 school year. So much so that it has been suggested to start preparing now for those eventual changes. Districts will be required to establish a multi-sensory structured literacy certification process for teachers of students in grades K through 3. This certification process will align with a guidebook that will be created by the Ohio Dyslexia Committee. This guidebook will contain information about best practices and methods for universal screening, intervention, and remediation for children with dyslexia or for those displaying dyslexic characteristics and tendencies. Together, the ODC and the ODE will do the following for school districts. So there's a number of things that they'll do. A few of those things include provide professional development, develop reporting mechanisms for the submission of student data, and identify evidence-based screening and intervention measures to evaluate the literacy skills of students in grades K through 5. A summary of what the districts will be required to do in the upcoming school years beginning in 22-23 includes, and there's a number of them, establish a multidisciplinary team to administer the measures and analyze the results, administer Tier 1 dyslexia screenings starting in 2023 to all students in grades K through 3, students in grades 4 through 6 upon request, and transfer students. The schools are to identify each student at risk of dyslexia based on the results of that Tier 1 screening, monitor their progress of each at-risk student towards attaining grade level skills, then administer a Tier 2 screening to measure those at-risk students who have not shown significant progress toward attaining the grade level skills, report the results of the Tier 2 screening to the parent, provide the parent or guardian with a written explanation of the district or school structured literacy program, and then report the results of the screening to the ODE. So that is why they are asking schools to start now, because that is a lot for the schools to have to implement. In addition, all educators will be required to obtain professional development and dyslexia instruction between 6 and 18 clock hours. Last week, President Biden signed House Resolution 1319, the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. The legislation contains several education-related items, including $122 billion for elementary and secondary education received through formula grants to states. I'll continue to follow this as information becomes available for the state of Ohio. And in new bills introduced in the last month, we've got House Bill 91 that allows school districts, among others, to enter into public-private agreement as it relates to certain public facilities. House Bill 110, which is the biennium budget bill. House Bill 112 to require one-time performance audits of school districts with a current academic distress commission. House Bill 122 to establish and modify requirements regarding the provision of telehealth services of school psychologists, speech language pathologists, and occupational therapists. House Bill 147 to require the ODE to develop a process for requesting an investigation of a school's compliance with its policy prohibiting harassment, intimidation, or bullying. House Bill 151 to revise the Ohio Resident Educator Program. House Bill 170 to provide funding to schools and other entities through the ESSER funds in response to COVID. House Bill 200 to revise the state report card and school accountability systems. And House Bill 205 to enact Collins Law, the Ohio Anti-Bullying and Hazing Act. In the Senate, Senate Bill 66 was introduced to establish a career pathways apprentice program. Senate Bill 100 to appropriate $70,000 in grants to each ESC to assist with hiring a licensed independent social worker and authorize a mental health professional to provide a crisis assessment to a suicidal minor without parental consent. And Senate Bill 111 to provide funding to the schools and other entities through the ESSER fund in response to COVID-19. And that concludes the legislative report.
Ms. Fisher, if I may, I'd like to piggyback onto that legislative report with some information. Regarding the Fair School Funding Plan, in anticipation of its consideration in the Senate, meetings are being organized by Senate district to provide the opportunity for all school district leaders to meet with their senator to discuss the need for a fair, transparent, and understandable school funding formula. Leadership teams that are comprised of superintendents, treasurers, and board members in each Senate district are working together to organize the virtual meeting with their senator to reach out to their colleagues to encourage them to attend the meeting. So I'd like to let you know to please be looking for an email that should be coming soon. It will be outlining a Zoom meeting with our state senator, Sandy O'Brien, on Wednesday, March 24th at 11:30 a.m. And apparently Sandy only has about a half hour to give us for that Zoom meeting. So this email is going to encourage any superintendent, treasurer, and board member that is able to join that Zoom meeting so that the state senator can ask questions, we can give information and share the importance of this fair school funding plan and to finally have a constitutionally sound school funding plan in Ohio. So I just wanted to let you know to be looking for that email, and if you're able to join that Zoom, please do. Our leadership team for our Senate district is comprised of AJ Calderon, the superintendent down in La Brea in Trumbull County, Pat Colucci at Buckeye, Chris Edison at PV, and myself. So we're trying to spearhead that effort to reach out to our state senator, and this will be done in every Senate district around Ohio. Thanks.
Okay, ATEC report. We had our board meeting on Monday, discussing much of the same items like the school calendar and so forth. There were 2 new members on the board since last year. So we got to have a tour of the formerly the A building, which is now the Dr. Brockway building. And we got to see some of the students at work in computers and with the 10th grade program, which lets the 10th graders get a little bit of taste of the various programs that they could sign up for during their junior and senior years. And it was really great to see the enthusiasm and the sometimes over-enthusiasm when they started to show off their skills with a saw in the middle of a conversation. But it was really a very interesting and enlightening and positive tour. Report to superintendent.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. I'll begin tonight with the Geneva Pride Positives. It always brings me great pride to share some of the great events, activities, efforts being made by our student, staff, community in the Geneva Pride Positives. Over the past few weeks, Osterberg, Cork, and Geneva Platt R. Spencer, 5th grade students have started playing their recorders. The class ventures outside in order to practice and play while being socially distanced. The tweets from the recorders are a sign that spring is around the corner. Students at Osterberg, Cork, and GPS are taking part in a community service project called Feed Our Vets. This is taking place from March 1st through the 31st, and families are donating non-perishable foods to help feed the veterans in Ashtabula County. All the food collected will be donated to the food pantry in Ashtabula. Monetary donations are also being accepted. The elementary principals and 20 teachers attended a PAX Heroes professional development on March 11th. This program focuses on specific interventions and strategies to help students and staff maintain a positive learning environment for all. PAX Heroes was paid through the K-12 PBIS grant that was awarded this year to Geneva Elementary buildings. Thank you to Mrs. Brzenko for setting up this training. And kindergarten registration is happening this month, which the district entitled March Gladness, as we are glad to welcome our new students and families to the district. This is the first year the registration is done fully online. The district has 41 families registered the first 2 weeks of registration. Looking forward to many more registering by the end of March. We will continue to register others throughout spring and summer months. At Geneva Middle School, all students at Geneva Middle School successfully participated in Restart Readiness testing this past week. Restart Readiness testing measures students against current state standards in the method that mirrors the Ohio State test. Teachers are now using the results in combination with information from other assessments such as iReady and Study Island to participate in an intense data review that will help form whole group instruction and identify individual gaps in learning among students. Teachers will begin to address these gaps right away with the planned interventions throughout the 4th grading period and into the summer. Also at Geneva Middle School, the Geneva Middle School Steering Committee held penny wars over the last 2 weeks to raise needed funds for upcoming grade level activities. All grade levels participated and the 6th grade was victorious. The 6th grade will receive a reward movie and snack for their victory. In all, the steering committee was able to raise approximately $500. Thank you to our students and families for participating. The Geneva Middle School 7th and 8th grade choirs will be holding a concert on the evening of Tuesday, March 23rd in the gymnasium. The concert will be delivered in 2 parts, with only 1 grade level presenting at each time in order to adequately provide spacing and distance within our venue. Students participating in the events will be allocated 2 tickets for in-person guests, and the event will be live streamed for those who are unable to attend. The 7th grade concert begins at 6:30 and the 8th grade concert begins at 7:30. At Geneva High School, the Geneva High School Theater Program produced Steel Magnolias this past weekend to live audiences. Audience numbers for all 3 shows totaled over 150. 30 theater students were involved in the production. The show was very well received by audiences, and the students felt that this production was helpful for them to return to a sense of normalcy. Congratulations to Mrs. Christopher and the cast and crew for a job well done. Next week, the theater program will be starting a series of technical workshops designed for underclassmen to learn more about backstage elements of theater. This will help in teaching and recruiting new technical crews for next year. The Ohio State University awarded Holly Engel, a 2017 GHS graduate and daughter of Mrs. Christopher, earned a prestigious university fellowship in the doctoral program for French and Francophone studies. The fellowship includes 5 years of full funding for the PhD program plus a stipend. The fellowship for the first year is paid for 12 months without teaching responsibilities. After the first year, Holly will be teaching an undergraduate class while continuing her work for her PhD. Holly is finishing her last semester at the College of Worcester, where she is at the top of her class with a double major in English and French and a minor in piano performance. It's always great to acknowledge the wonderful things that our graduates are doing as they pursue their degrees and other activities as they continue their lives. So congratulations to Holly. And finally, for Geneva High School, teens are all about gaming. In 2018, the Pew Research Center reported that 97% of teen boys and 83% of teen girls played video games. Some of these teens are involved in school sports and clubs. Many, however, are not. By offering esports as an extracurricular activity, schools reach students who often are otherwise disengaged from the school community. Esports in schools can transport these kids from the solitary world of digital gaming into the common space of school computer lab or a library commons. These otherwise uninvolved students join the ranks of their successfully involved peers, more likely to be engaged during classes, more likely to graduate, more likely to aspire to higher education, and less likely to suffer and spread the harms of feeling out of sync with their school community. Geneva High School is moving towards experimenting in the esports world by starting off with a small group of students to see how it works, and will then open it up for all students who are interested. Gaming can be an isolating pastime. When students can join a school esports team, it becomes a social experience. Without a school esports club, passionate gamers often feel left out of mainstream school social life. Organized esports bring these kids into the fold. It can help them become accepted and respected members of their school community. Esports and STEM go hand in hand. Students are drawn to gaming, are often equally captivated by the broader technology ecosystem. Sponsors at both the high school and college level report that a substantial number of their esport participants are interested in science, technology, engineering, and math. Beyond these benefits, esports in particular provide students with added options for their next steps in life. So congratulations to all the great activities that are happening in Geneva schools.
Eric, I just want to say, great job, or maybe I should say très bien. I love hearing about Holly. I love hearing about what our graduates are doing. They do so well in our top, our top schools here in the nation. And it just is great to hear. I'm glad to hear that our theater programs are returning to normalcy. Love this idea of the March Gladness to welcome new students. That's awesome. And I'm assuming that our future board meetings will get some updates on maybe how COVID, how that's maybe had a negative effect on our students and in our readiness testing. So I'm sure we'll have an update here on that in the next couple of meetings, but at least the initial results is it wasn't as bad as we thought it might have been, but so I guess stay tuned, right?
Yes, I'll be sharing a little bit in other today with some of those results. I did want to mention, because Mr. Arndt had asked at our last meeting how our Scholastic Bowl team had competed this year. we didn't do quite as well as we've done in the past. Our varsity came out 7th out of 16 teams. But we do have some hope as we have some young superstars coming up through the Scholastic Bowl ranks. Our JV B team finished 5th out of 16 teams. So I think all of the students that competed in the Scholastic Bowl, the comments that I've heard is they were all glad just to be competing again. So congratulations to all those students.
I recommend the adoption of the enclosed Geneva Area City School District 2021-22 school calendar.
Second.
Any discussion?
Eric, is there any update here on this calendar from what we were told last week? This seems pretty consistent with what most districts are doing. And, you know, my concern is always about busing and about, you know, schedules not corresponding with others.
Yes, all the schools I know have the calendar on this month's board agenda for a second hearing, and they're very close. There are some schools that will be starting that week before, the week of August 23rd through the 27th. I know, I believe ATEC, Ms. Fisher, you had mentioned that their start will be
25th.
the 25th. So I know they're one that typically we're transporting students to, and then 2 other schools plan to be on the 30th or 31st. So I think everybody's more in line. I think the breaks are in line coming up as we look into the 21-22 school year.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Metzler,
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz, Mr. Arndt,
Yes.
Mr. Dana,
Yes.
and Ms. Fisher.
Yes. I recommend that the board approve the enclosed interdistrict open enrollment policy for the 2021-22 school year.
I'll move.
Second.
Discussions?
Yes. I have a question on page 2, item 12. And it states that a representative of the district of residence, so that's where the student is coming from, will be invited here to participate in the meeting. Am I reading that right?
Page 2, number 12, correct?
Yes.
If a student is evaluated for placement in special education program, representatives from the district of residence must be invited to participate in the placement meeting. Yes. We do, because these are students that are open enrolling to our district, if we're providing special education services, there's always the chance that the student will be returning back to their district at some point. So we try to make sure that the team of providing special education services, everyone's still on the same page, so that the services that are being provided, the district of residence is aware of what services are being entered into.
Okay. And under priority 4, now the next page,
Okay.
towards the bottom, it says number 6. A decision of the superintendent is final. Do you have the final decision on every single open enrollment that comes here?
I do. I sign off on all open enrollments.
You actually see every single one and sign off on them?
Yes, I do.
Oh, you briefed on every single one of them?
I look through the open enrollment information that's submitted, and then if there's questions that I have, I do have a conversation with other personnel in the district.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Ortiz, Mr. Arndt,
Yes.
Mr. Dana,
Yes.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
and Mrs. Metzler.
Yes.
I recommend the 2021-22 budget with the amounts and rates as determined by the Ashtabula County Budget Commission be approved.
Second.
Discussion.
You have anything, Kevin, we need to know, or?
No, you know, this is the annual step in the budget process. As 2020 was a reappraisal year for the county. These all reflect increases in each of those funds and in the inside millage. So the revenue will be going up a little bit for our property taxes as long as collections follow suit at the same collection rate. Yes.
When the properties go to the board of revisions, if they're living in our district, does that then affect this later, or? how does that work?
Well, the county auditor does not issue a revised this, but yeah, if there are valuation complaints that are approved by the Asheville County Budget Commission, then that would affect collections on those particular properties. And that's it. You know, if you recall, we will usually identify those that are a substantial amount, and we may file a counter complaint. Now, as Mrs. Metzler has reported several times, last year and continuing this year, there's legislation to try to limit our ability to do that or make it more difficult and more time consuming in order to file a counter complaint, or as some districts might do, file a complaint if they feel that a property's been undervalued due to a recent sale. So, you know, we're trying to, or our organizations, OSBA, BASA, OASBO, are all trying to get people to give testimony, opponent testimony towards those bills or those attempts to kind of shackle our ability to contest claims.
Any other questions, discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
Mr. Dana?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler?
Yes.
And Mrs. Ortiz?
Okay, item 5, Third Dimension, Inc. is seeking an enterprise zone tax incentive of 60% exemption of property tax for 10 years associated with the proposed construction of a new addition to their current facility located at 633 Pleasant Avenue, Geneva. I recommend that the board authorize the superintendent to draft a letter to the Ashtabula County Commissioners that the board is not opposed to this enterprise zone tax incentive.
I'll move.
Discussion.
Before I can support something like this, I need to know, one, how many employees they're going to employ, what's going to be the average wage of the employees there, how they're going to add to the community. If they're going to be like another company that just moved in here and they added 18 jobs and they were all minimum wage jobs, which do nothing. We've given so many tax abatements in the past that I just can't see doing any more. It's not like companies are moving in here left and right, and every week we have a new company that announces in the Star Beacon that they're moving in here. And I think the more that we agree to, the more it hurts us in the long run.
Well, just to note, for this particular abatement, they're asking for the letter that we are not opposed. They do not need our approval to grant this because it is at the statutory limit of 60% in 10 years. If they exceeded either that percentage or that time period, it would need the board's approval to pass. In the letter, it does address that they are expected to create 23 full-time permanent jobs with an associated annual payroll of $1 million. That would calculate out to an average of $43,478 per job for $1 million payroll on 23 full-time jobs. So they wouldn't appear to be minimum wage jobs.
Well, I understand what you're saying, and I understand the 60%. We've been told all this before with other companies, and I know that they can do the 60% by law. The recommendation is that the board is not opposed. I am just one person that's saying that I am opposed. That's all.
And there was a little bit of additional information that they provided in the application itself. Currently, right now, they have 63 employees. With the expansion, they're going to add another 23 new positions for a total of 86 that would be at the facilities. And again, they were looking at a cost for the project would be between 13 million and 16 million upon completion.
So I'll just indicate here, I understand Rick's concerns here. This is something that the General Assembly has allowed for here, and so it pits one community against another, and it does have a negative impact here upon our property tax revenues that are so necessary here from which to support our schools. So I get it. I get the concern here with respect to that. But unfortunately, this is how the game is played here if you want to try to bring in new industries here into an area. And so as was previously mentioned, this is something that it doesn't even need, school board approval. They don't need our approval here from which to grant this or not. So they're allowed to have it at the 60% level for 10 years. So, unfortunately, as the current state legislature has things set up here, this is the game that we have to play. And if our communities don't do this, you've seen how there's been some businesses that have gone elsewhere. If we weren't willing to give these tax incentives, so we may not like it, but under the current environment that we're at, I really don't see what other choice that we have. And again, this is something that's going to go through with our support or without it.
So then do we have to send a letter at all?
We don't. No, sorry.
This letter came like right after our last meeting, and they were looking for our letter by March 12th. So
It did arrive, I forget, what was the date that we actually received the letter? While the letter is dated February 26th, we didn't receive it until about March 9th or 10th.
I believe so, yes.
So we contacted the 503 Corp. And let them know that there is no way that the board would be able to do this by March 12th. They understand. I think part of this may be also, we have a new city manager. That city manager hasn't reached out yet to meet with the school district isn't familiar with our timeline as far as board meetings. A lot of people in the city might think that we meet twice a month like them. Where we're meeting the third Wednesday of every month. I don't know that, but that's my assumption. So they know that we had to act upon this to give the authority to the superintendent to write such a letter at this board meeting, and that the earliest they would hear from us would be tomorrow, March 18th.
This was also on the agenda for ATAC. So if our mail was slow, theirs was slow also. So.
Right.
Last Monday was when it was on the agenda for ATAC.
Do you mind if I ask what ATEC did with that?
Pardon me?
Yes, what ATEC did with it.
It passed. Unanimous.
So do we have to write a letter? I mean, okay, we're past the deadline. I know we were going to do something after their deadline anyway, but do we have to do a letter one way or the other with this?
Well, the board doesn't have to do anything. Well, they're just requesting a letter that the board's not opposed. If the board votes no, and the authority isn't given to the superintendent to draft such a letter, then we just let them know, no, we can't provide that letter.
They were just describing it to us as being more of a public relations type. Here, see, we're good people. The school districts and the county approve of us and are on board with what we're attempting to do.
They're making an effort to reach out to the board rather than just passing things that don't require board approval without the board's knowledge. The last time that they did this was a couple years ago, and what they'd hoped to do didn't happen anyway. If you recall, the board did approve for us to draft a letter. They had wanted to move the Ashtabula County Conventions Visitor Bureau from its location on Austenburg Road to the location on Route 45 where the BP station used to be. And they asked the board to approve a letter of, not being opposed. And in the end, the person that had them own the building that they were in would not let them out of their lease. So they couldn't move. The property was owned by NASIF's. NASIF was looking to do something with that property. And as you now see, they have a chocolate store there. So it did work out. They had hoped to make that move. So they're just trying to reach out and let the board know, even on those requests that don't require board approval.
Any other discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Dana,
Yes.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler,
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz, Mr. Arndt,
No.
Okay, item 6, I recommend that the board hire Dr. Terry L. Renard-Creharn as superintendent on a 5-year contract from August 1, 2021 to July 31, 2026, to be paid according to the adopted administrator's contract guidelines, with additional stipulations enumerated in the contract that supersede those guidelines, and subject to meeting certification requirements of the state of Ohio.
So moved.
Discussion? Roll call.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler,
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz,
Yes.
Mr. Arndt,
Yes.
and Mr. Dana.
Yes.
Yes. I would like to let everyone know that our new future superintendent is in attendance today with her husband. And at some point during the evening, if you'd like to socially distancingly greet her and her husband, I'm sure she would appreciate starting to learn a few new faces, or half the faces. So it's a strange time, and thank you for being here. Okay, I recommend that the contract for the following administrator be renewed for 3 years to be paid according to the adopted administrator's contract guidelines and subject to meeting certification requirements of the state of Ohio.
I'll move.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Metzler,
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz, Mr. Arndt,
Yes.
Mr. Dana,
Yes.
and Ms. Fisher.
Yes. Item 8, I recommend the following personnel actions for the contract year.
Move.
Discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Ortiz, Mr. Arndt,
Yes.
Mr. Dana,
Yes.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
and Mrs. Metzler.
Yes.
Item 9, recommend the following personnel actions for the 21-22 contract year.
Second.
Second.
Discussion?
Yes. The difference between a substitute teacher and a substitute educational assistant. So between 1 and 2.
Right. Teachers are certified. They'd have to have certification to be able to teach and to substitute. Educational assistant, they may have a certification, but they're not a teacher. They're typically in the classroom to provide assistance with a student. So a student aide, a classroom aide.
They always assist the teacher.
Correct.
Okay, so substitute teachers, we have 42. Is that historically the norm? Like for 2017, 18, 19, do we normally have that amount of substitute teachers?
It varies a little bit from year to year. We lost a number of substitutes this year due to some health concerns with the pandemic. But many of these substitutes, some will substitute on a pretty regular basis. Others are substituting in multiple districts. So not only would they be on the substitute teacher list for Geneva, but also probably other county schools. So we share a lot of substitutes with other school districts in Ashtabula County.
Okay, so if we look at this last page, we have substitute teachers, secretaries, educational assistants, cafeteria subs, Pony Express. As a whole, do we have enough substitutes to carry out our mission, or are we short in any one of these categories?
We're short at times in all of the categories, depending on how many are out. And as I mentioned, many of these substitutes work in multiple districts. Substitute teachers, typically we can cover. Educational aides, we've had some times that we have not been able to cover enough educational aides when we've had a number that have been out. Cafeteria, most of the time Mrs. Jones can cover, but sometimes she's covering even at a cafeteria. Bus drivers is probably our biggest. All of these are on, these are our regular drivers too, but we also put them on as subs so that they can perform some duties at other times during the year. And then custodians and housekeepers, same thing. We've been without and have not been able to fill. Some of the individuals that sign up to sub, some will work on a regular basis, some rarely will work, but sometimes we're able to get them in for at least some short periods of time.
Are the shortages that we experience, is that the norm for the other districts in the county, or is it just us?
No, it's across the county, across the state. As I talk to other superintendents in other districts, there's shortages in all areas across the state. Transportation seems to be the biggest.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Arndt,
Yes.
Mr. Dana,
Yes.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler,
Yes.
and Mrs. Ortiz.
Okay. Other. Mr. Kujala?
Mrs. Metzler, did you want to begin our other this
Sure.
evening?
Yeah, sure, thank you. So the end of February, I was able to meet with Mr. Currents, the director of our Maintenance and Transportation Department. I went over to the bus garage and I spent the morning there with him, and he kind of gave me a tour of the facility, introduced me to the staff that was on site. I did not meet Mr. Brigard, he was not there, but I met Ms. Leonard and Jay and Dave in the garage. And Mr. Currents and I had a really good conversation. I didn't know a lot about the bus garage before going, so this was really a very informative meeting that I had with him and his staff. He said basically, as the director of maintenance and transportation, he spends about 25% of his time in transportation, 75% of his time on maintenance. We talked about some of the projects that he's working on in terms of trying to investigate pricing for Wi-Fi bus cameras, and they would be more like the eyeball type cameras. So he's looking at some pricing on that to see how he could get our buses outfitted with those and how much that would cost. And also a card swipe system where if every student had a card to swipe as they got on and off the bus, it would help him when the parents would call and wonder, you know, the bus just came by the stop, my student's not on there. If there were any problems, particularly maybe for the younger kids not getting on the right bus. There's a lot of other things that swipe card would help with, but that was one of the main aspects of that. And software, we talked about the software that can track the buses and their location, where they're at, their speed. So he's already got something like that on the buses. So it was kind of informative. I had no idea that our buses were equipped in that manner. He talked about how he is regularly contacted to take a look at video from our buses right now because of COVID. And actually the day that I was visiting, there was a situation where they needed to try and track down who was sitting next to a student that had tested positive for COVID. So he's looking at that video. He has to get back to the principal. So there's a lot going on with COVID, and we don't really think about, we think about our classrooms and we think about the cafeteria, and you think about the students just being transported, but you don't necessarily think about the investigation that has to go on if there's a case that's positive in the schools. When I talked with Ms. Leonard, what I did was I went back a few weeks later because her and I didn't have much time to speak. She works a split shift, And I didn't really realize that. It makes complete sense because the buses are out early and they run late, so she's kind of there with them. But that is part of the reason why when you start to hear grumblings in the community about not being able to get a hold of the bus garage, that's part of the reason why, is because she works a split shift, and many, many, many times she's driving a bus instead of being in her office answering the phones at her desk. We just talked about substitute bus drivers and the lack thereof across many school districts. And when she doesn't have a bus driver, she is the sub. If there's more than one bus driver that she doesn't have, then they're combining routes. So she's got a very difficult job. I'll talk about that in a second. But anyway, so it was a really good conversation with Mr. Kearns. He took me to the high school. He brought me here and he showed me one of the projects that he was working on with the flooring. He took me into some of the maintenance rooms and where the heating systems are massive. But I was really glad to take a tour of that. It was pretty eye-opening, the amount of maintenance that we have just in this one building. I didn't even go to the others. And he says that, you know, he feels that he's pretty approachable and that the morale at the bus garage has improved since he was there. So those were a couple of his positives. When I met with Ms. Leonard, I was there for a morning with her as well. We talked about the shortness of drivers. And I asked her, you know, what do you do? What's your normal job? If you're not driving the bus as a substitute driver, what are you supposed to be doing? And she gave me about 6 or 7 different things. It includes payroll, bus pass issues, day off requests from her drivers, last minute route changes, changes are adding to the routes and updates that come in from her bus drivers. So we think about the bus garage as having this person that's supposed to answer the phone for the parent that is like, where's the bus? What's going on with the bus? But she's got so many other duties that I think many of the public don't really realize. And her part of that bus garage, she is spread very thin. She doesn't have enough drivers. She doesn't have enough time in her day to handle all of these different aspects of COVID as they've been brought up to her. So her and I had a very frank discussion. I was very happy to meet with her. And a couple of the good things that she mentioned was she really likes how we try and get 2 new buses every year. That works out very well for the fleet, works out very well for the drivers. And even though her job is very chaotic many days and she's got a lot of balls in the air at all times, she really likes the versatility of her job because she could be doing 10 different types of job in that one position, and she loves working with the kids. So those were, I did the one visit in February, I did the other one in March. I was very happy to be welcomed into the bus garage. And I told them, you know, they said anytime. I said, well, be careful what you wish for because I'll be back. But they seemed pretty receptive to that. So that was, and if you guys ever have any questions about my visits, I know I talk about it here, feel free to contact me and I can give you more information about the visits because there's so much more that I learn when I go on these visits that would take too long to mention. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. I do have a few items tonight
Yes,
for
I
other.
thought so.
As I mentioned a little earlier, I wanted to talk a little bit about our learning, recovery, and extended learning plan. But as I was thinking about tonight, I was thinking it was exactly 1 year ago today we closed school for the first time due to the statewide closure that was issued by Governor DeWine and the Ohio Department of Health. Since we had the closure that was extended for the rest of 2019-20 school year, we had no spring athletics, activities, traditional graduation, prom, awards for last year. Planning over the entire summer for the return to school plan, and that was multiple plans as things changed and information changed. A hybrid start to 4-day return with the Wednesdays for support and sanitizing since we had a large group of online students. Closure from around Thanksgiving break all the way through the start of 2021. More planning for the return to school for the second semester where we would reassess our online students and decide what we could do for the remaining part of this school year. And now we're to a point where we're working on the learning recovery and extended learning plan for spring of 2021, summer of 2021, 2021-22, and 2022-23. So the first things that I wanted to provide for you is I did provide the current online information to you. This was something that we discussed at a previous meeting, and I know there was some discussion of what could we do on the Wednesdays? Could we look to come back to a 5-day? And one of the items that I shared with you is we offered a plan to our community and our families and our students. And part of that plan was to have online instruction available if that was their choice. We had many students return after the first 9 weeks that felt safe, felt comfortable, were ready to return to school. We had some return at the semester break, but not the number that I had anticipated that we would have many more return. And throughout the third grading period, we've had some sporadically return. I wanted to provide the numbers where we are right now so you can see each of the elementary buildings. We have 112 students still at the elementary that are totally online. And you can see the breakdown for the buildings, 26 at Cork or at Osterberg, 31 at Cork, and 54 at Geneva Platt or Spencer. You can also see the numbers for Geneva Middle School, grades 6 through 8, 115 students are again completely online. And at Geneva High School, we have 185 that are completely online. So right now we're at a total of 412 that have chosen to stay online, and the expectation is they're going to stay online for the rest of this year. I think as a district, we owe the support to those students because that was part of our plan. So when looking at what our recovery plan was going to look like coming in, there were a couple things that I felt it was a necessity that we would do, and one is start providing some support, some recovery right now. And the calendar that I provided to you in the Learning Recovery and Extended Learning Plan does provide some recovery Wednesdays, and I'll talk about those in just a few minutes. I want to provide just a summary of the Learning Recovery and Extended Learning Plan. Governor DeWine had asked school districts to design a plan to meet the needs of their students. The plan does not need board approval, but your verbal input and your support and approval would be appreciated, as this is a district-wide decision. The plans need to be shared with the community and the families, and I plan to put this on our website as of March 26th. And at that point, the link then will need to be sent to the General Assembly by April 1st. So there's a great deal of information in this plan. I hope that you had an opportunity to look it over. But I wanted to highlight a few items, and I wanted to share a new item with you. Also, one of the items that I provided tonight was a sheet that was entitled Recovery Students and Data. And I provided information for our elementary, and these students are being recommended for the recovery plan in the areas of English Language Arts, ELA, and math, or both. And we used iReady data, we used diagnostic data, we used current grades and progress, and we used teacher recommendations to determine if there were students that we needed to target for this assistance. And you can see the breakdown for the various buildings of the students that have been identified and the percentages. The first number indicates the number of students in that building column by the total number of students in that grade level, and then the percentage of students that is for that particular grade level in that school. You can see we have about 32% of our elementary students that we have targeted now for some type of recovery assistance. On the back of that, I provided the information from Geneva Middle School, and that's broken down in two different subsections, the ELA and the math. You can see the number of students that were tested for each grade level, the students that were below grade level for the reading or the Ready Reset test that was just provided, and also if they had also taken the iReady assessment. And you can see the number of students in each of those areas, reading and math, that again are below the expected level at this point. And finally, on the bottom of that page for Geneva High School, now Geneva High School is a little different in that they don't have diagnostics that they give to the students throughout the year, because students take a variety of different courses that are offered each semester and each year to the students. Most of the information is dependent on their coursework, their assessment grades, or other teacher recommendations. But you can see the breakdown when we look at students that are failing one course, two courses, or three or more courses. You can see the breakdown by grade. Under each grade, I did list the total number of students that are in that grade level, and then you can see the percentages for the students under each of those categories. Along with that, on the very last page, as part of the recovery, these are the course offerings that we are looking to provide this summer during our summer program for our high school students. So with all that being said, with the data that I just shared, let me talk a little bit about the plan. The first part was the Recovery Wednesdays. These are 6 dedicated Wednesdays that we would use. Now, we're using these Wednesdays for this support of students, to bring students into the building that need the targeted assistance, bringing those students into the building for a small group or individual attention. Now, we also have to realize that some of these grade levels are using those Wednesdays because they'll be having our online students that are not attending school come in for state testing if they're part of that grade level, grades 3 through 12. Any of those tests that are going on, students will be coming in on Wednesday if they are an online student. So there'll be a couple different activities and events happening at the schools. But we really want to target these students, again, very small groups, trying to provide help for K to 8 in the areas of ELA, English Language Arts, or math. For the high school, again, they're going to continue to work with those small groups in the course areas where they have students that still need assistance, that are failing grades, that may be part of the courses that are offered in the summer. So that's what we're looking to do with Recovery Wednesdays. If there happens to be a Wednesday that someone could not meet because of testing obligations or something else comes up, we do have a few other Wednesdays that they could shift that time to, as long as they communicate that with the families and students. The other part of this is the summer programs. The calendar that I provided to you in your packet does provide the breakdown for the summer programs. We're looking to provide 3 weeks for high school in June, 3 weeks for high school in July, 2 weeks for elementary, middle school. This would be K to 8 in June, and 2 weeks for elementary and middle school in July, and also a 1 week readiness for K to 8 in August, although that may also just be K to 5, depending on the needs of the middle school. The high school had also requested to possibly have a 3-week section in August. And again, this would probably be for limited courses. It may only be a course or 2 that would be offered if it was necessary, but they did want me to add that to the calendar. During the same time, ATEC will be running their program. Now, ATEC is aware that many schools within the Ashtabula County area are looking to provide their own summer programs this year at no cost to the students. And if there was someone that wanted to go to ATEC because maybe they lived on the eastern part of our border, or they were somewhere in the Austinburg area, maybe it was a little closer, or for some reason they wanted to attend ATEC, we would allow them to attend ATEC instead of our program. We're going to try to encourage everyone to come to our program, but we would allow them to attend ATEC if they needed to, again, with us picking up that cost. In addition, we're looking to do transportation for these students during the summer. Now, I did check with our transportation department. Right now, we had 4 transportation drivers that said for sure yes. We had 6 that were unsure. They were a maybe. But right now, we're looking at having transportation drivers that would be available in June and August. So we may have to do a little recruiting for July, or look how we would modify that program. Maybe not having transportation in July. That might have to be transportation that's provided through the families. But again, trying to provide as much transportation as we can. It may not be our normal stops that we're going to be able to provide for this summer program, but it may be where we're transporting from certain locations down at Geneva on the Lake, in Ostenburg, in Cork, so that if they can get them to a certain point, we would transport and then we would return them at the end of the program that day. The other part of this is going into next year. We've already talked about looking at tutoring that would be after school, and that would be K through grade 12. There would be some after school tutoring. Again, this would be outside the contractual hours of the teachers, and numerous teachers, about 25% to about 40%. There were some that were unsure if they wanted to obligate themselves to that. It said that they would be interested in tutoring. Again, with the focus being on ELA and math. And as I talked about in our last meeting, we also are looking at providing free books in the Kids Read Now program for all of our kindergarten through grade students this year. That would be something that they would select their books, and then they would be receiving 8 new books, and it does have a parent component that's part of that. So again, trying to make that school-home connection with those families, and again, promoting reading, promoting literacy with students in our lower elementaries. Those are all parts of the Learning Recovery Extended Learning Plan. They're spelled out in the document that I provided. I know there was a lot of information in there. I wanted to get it to you early enough so you had a chance to look, and then if there's any questions, I would gladly address those.
So I have some questions here, and one of my first questions I have here is that of our students who are struggling, do we have a further breakdown as far as are these, is there a difference between the in-person learning and the distance learning? Are we finding that if there's a difference here, like for instance, we always talk about the gold standard of teaching is in person. And is it where most of our students, are they struggling based on this distance learning or not? That's my first question.
We didn't break down the data that we just collected between the in-person and online, but I do have all of my administrators here. I don't know if any would want to share.
Let's get them to the mic. Remember, they don't pick up.
You might even want to just grab it with you in case someone else wanted to share. One moment, Mr. Dana. They were grabbing the microphone.
I appreciate that.
When we were looking at the data at the high school, the majority of the kids that are failing are coming from online. It's between 60 to 75% of those students that are struggling with the Fs. When we compiled our data for the middle school, we actually included on our spreadsheet with the data where the test was taken for the restart readiness and the amount of time that it was taken. Amount of time it took the students to take them, and also for the letters that will go home to the students that are going to be included in our additional intervention supports during the 4th grading period. If the student is currently enrolled in the online education program and they're not succeeding, we are strongly recommending that they return to in-person learning during the final grading period.
So, Mr. Anderson, do you have a percentage approximately between the online versus the in-person then, or no?
For the students that are currently struggling,
Yeah.
I don't have that information for you tonight, but I can get that for you.
Okay, thanks.
I have two mics now. At Geneva Platt, our Spencer Elementary, we did focus primarily on teacher observation and work samples. We did look at the iReady data, but to start the school year, we had 130 students out of our 430 that were remote. So a lot of that iReady data to start the year was skewed just because results were elevated because a lot of the parents were trying to help their children at home with those test scores. They didn't want to see those gaps per se. Our second iReady window was scheduled during the remote closure that occurred over the holidays, so we did not administer it at that time at the elementaries. We are going to administer iReady again in the springtime after we get through Ohio State testing. But overall, we feel a lot of the gaps that we have, they're mixed. They're from in-person kids that were forced to go remote because we as a district went remote last March by the state, and then again, we went remote between Thanksgiving in January. And we tried to work really hard with our families. We had a much more developed remote plan the second time around, but many parents state they can't do what we can do at school. So, I mean, basically, we're gonna focus on closing the gaps in reading and math for those that are interested. We have letters of interest set to go home tomorrow for specific students that we did target, and we're hoping to get a lot of those responses back to us prior to spring break, and then we want to make follow-up phone calls next Thursday when we are having our remote day, so we can make final plans the week we get back from spring break. Yes, I think I'm the speaker for the elementary buildings.
Mr. Dana, I know you had some other questions.
Yeah, I do. One of the things I just want to say is that we do have an opportunity here. There's so much data that we are accumulating. You know, I think that we know already that, you know, in-person teaching is the best, and we're able to give more aid to those students that are struggling in an in-person setting than in an online setting. And so when we have a legislature that keeps on making cuts to public education and giving more to online classes, you know, when we're looking at budgetary you know, components here, you know, where are we going to spend our money as taxpayers? I think there's a real opportunity that COVID has given us here from which to show why the in-person learning is so important. And so I'm thrilled that we're gathering this data. And I think there's a story that we're going to be able to perhaps tell about this. And I'm curious as to what the changes that were made when we went remote here at the start of this school year, whether, you know, what was the impact here of this? So there's a lot of data that we have that is meaningful and that I think that we can learn from as far as, you know, what worked and what didn't work. And I'm a stats guy, and I'll be very interested in seeing what the data shows from our district, and frankly, what we can learn from other districts here, not only in our county, but elsewhere. I wanted to talk about a portion of the plan where it says for all of them that these classes are subject to enrollment numbers. So I'm curious if you've given some thought as to what are the enrollment numbers going to be for us to have an in-person, let's say, summer class, or you know, what is it that you're thinking about here with respect to that? And if we are not going to offer a class because there's limited enrollment, I'm curious, first of all, what that number is, but then secondly, is there a possibility here for an online component here to that, since you've indicated that we do have a significant number of students that seem to prefer that online component. So can you address that, please?
We are still discussing an online component. Again, as was shared a little bit, we think the in-person connection would be really important, and we're trying to keep those numbers low. Again, we're probably looking at classes of maybe 10 students, you know, give or take a few. If we had a class that, or a grade band that maybe a class that only had 1 or 2 students, we may look to do something different with those students. Maybe we could try to create a grade band where they might go in with a different class. But again, trying to service all of our students, but again, use the funds that we're using through the ESSER to be as efficient as we can in the number of students that we're serving.
And then the final question I'll ask here is about with the K through 3 students here. And I know that there's going to be, not an in-person component on that, but there's going to be giving a reading list here to these students, based on books, I guess, that they have picked. And I'm just kind of curious how the assessment's going to occur with that, so that we have like a better gauge here as far as what effect that this had, upon them. And again, with this in preference for in-person teaching, is that something we need to at least consider for that K through 3 students?
K to 3 would have an in-person. They're eligible for the in-person summer school program. That's K to 8 for the elementary middle school. The reading program, the books, Kids Read Now books, that is something that is going to be sent to every current kindergarten through 3rd grade student that we have. That's a separate program. It was something that we were going to implement last year as we went from the half-day kindergarten to a full day, looking for some of the gaps that have been created by maybe our program that we had previously. We will be able to get data for that. Part of it is in each book, there's comprehension questions that can be addressed by the family, very simple, that hopefully you have family involvement, brother, sister, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, whoever it may be, that will ask the students some of those questions. And then there is an online component. So as they finish those books before they get their next one, there is some information that they can complete online, which will then provide some data to us and to the teachers as we end the summer and go into next school year.
So there will not be an in-person component here to that, correct? For K through 3 for the reading?
There'll be an in-person component for K8.
Through 8, yeah.
So K3 students will be involved in that in ELA or math. The books that they'll be receiving is really a separate part of that. Now, if the teachers have already talked that if they were the instructor for one of those summer courses, they would probably include some kind of lesson or some kind of conversation discussion on those books if the students were bringing them with them to school. But that's really almost a separate item that's for all of our K to 3 students. So everyone would be would receive those.
Can we, I'm just curious, what would the cost be from which to follow up on all K through, 3 students on that reading program? I'm just curious. I'm always challenged by that here because it's something that the state, and it's not just Geneva, but it's statewide. Yeah. I'm just amazed at the number of students that can't pass that reading guarantee, at the start of the 3rd year. I mean, we do wonders here by the end of the 3rd grade, but I'm always just concerned here, because, the statistics and the studies show that if you are not able to read, I think, ideally we'd like to have kids prepared, before the 3rd grade, they're like already behind. So, I mean, when we're talking about where we can get the best bang for our buck, that's why I'm asking that question. Is that, is that an area that we could perhaps put more attention to? You bear in mind, Eric, you were the one who asked for board and input here on this. So you asked for it, I'm giving it to you.
I appreciate it. That Kids Read Now program for the books, again, all students would receive 8 books during the summer.
I get that.
Those would be mailed to their home. That runs about $26,000. We're using our Student Success and Wellness Funds for that. Not only are those books then something that they're going to be using during the summer, but it's books that they have selected by interest. That's one of the parts of the program, that they get to select their books by interest. And it also starts those home libraries. So brothers, sisters, other members in the family, that starts a home library for many of those students, which we're hoping helps with literacy.
So my question here is the follow-up with that. Is there at some point where you can be like, hey, how's it going with that reading program? Do you have any questions? That's where I'm at. That's where I'm getting at.
I got you. There will be follow-up. All of the teachers K-3 will receive online information that's available that the families had completed, and also some guides that they could use as the students return to school in the fall.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else?
Yeah. I just have one question. Are we going to use all buildings? Are we going to combine elementaries, or are we going to use all 5 buildings?
At this time, we haven't made that final determination. We had talked for transportation needs to possibly look at using the high school for the high school program, and possibly using the middle school site for the K-8 program. That way it might help. We would obviously separate the students into different areas of the building, but that would probably assist a little bit in transportation. But we also have talked about potentially using one of the elementaries. It would probably be the one in town, bringing Osterberg and Cork students to town for the program. Mm-hmm.
I have a few questions also. I think we might have talked about this last month, but have you decided on the hours for these programs? The Recovery Wednesdays, how many hours are we expecting the students to come in?
I know high school, and Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, 8 to 12? Okay, 8 to 12 for the high school. And the elementary, we, again, looking to stagger a little bit. We were probably looking like an 8:30, 8:45, kind of almost like their start time, to like a 12:30, 11:30, 12:30. Again, looking at what we have to do with transportation.
Okay.
It's probably going to be about a three-hour program, but 5 days a week. We're not looking at doing alternating days, but a 5-day-a-week program for the 2 weeks.
Okay, so that's in the summer, the
Yes.
summer ones. Okay, so on the Recovery Wednesdays.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I was going to ask both of them.
That's
anyway.
fine. Again, looking at transportation needs. Elementary, what did you decide on for Wednesdays? So 8 to 11 is middle school, probably like an 8:30 to, or more traditional start for the elementary, kind of that 8:30 to probably 11:30. Again, trying to coordinate with the transportation that we have.
Okay.
We'll try to use our lunch program, since we're giving breakfast and lunch anyways to those students that are coming in, give those students their lunches. We do have some bus drivers that also work in the cafeteria. Typically, they are finishing their routes by 8:30, 8:45, and then they go to their cafeteria job. And we have some drivers that don't have cafeteria drives, so they'll be able to drive. But it's a little bit of, there's some logistics to getting enough transportation to get all students on those Wednesdays. So there may be some staggered times that we'll have to use.
Okay. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, you sent out surveys to the teachers to ask their opinions on how they'd like to see some of these programs implemented, whether it be before school, after school. You did something like that with the teachers?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So was there generally a buy-in that they could handle spending 3 hours on a Wednesday doing the Recovery Wednesday, in addition to what their responsibilities are with the online students as well?
I'm not sure there's a full buy-in for that. We have some differences when you look at the number of online students for particular grade levels, particular classes. You range from anywhere where someone has 0 online students at this point, everyone has returned, where you have still teachers, especially at the high school level, that have more students because they're the highest number of online students. So they have more students and over the number of periods that they have in a day. So there already are some differences. I know middle school had looked at their staff and said, you know, for a particular period of time on these Wednesdays, they were dividing their whole staff, regardless of what their curricular expertise is, dividing their whole staff, that for the hour and a half that they're doing English language arts, they're going to have the same topic, geared by those teachers teaching that, and then math would be the other hour and a half. So those teachers would be less the hour and a half on that Wednesday, but everybody would have some involvement in the plan. Elementary is a little different. Most of theirs will be their own students, again, small groups. They're going to lose some time, but I think the time we're losing on the Wednesdays are for the benefit of the students, and that's why we're here. So if we can help students recover, if we can help students provide some support, yes, we want to make sure that we're addressing our online students, and that's why really I made the decision that we weren't going back to a 5-day a week. I think we need to use this time effectively and efficiently to support our students that need the help, along with still providing the online. There's been a little pushback. To answer your question, there's been a little pushback, but I think the administrators have handled it well, and I think the teachers are adapting to the idea, because I think they all know that the need's there.
And I guess just from observation from these meetings and the information that we're being given, and I appreciated Mr. Dana's question, because I was going to ask the same thing. How many of these students that we're identifying are online versus in person? And with the information from Mr. Weatherholt from the high school, if you're talking about 60% at the minimum being the online students that are having a problem, what's the likelihood that these students are going to be coming in for these Recovery Wednesdays to get the help? I applaud your efforts to put together a plan to reach out to the families and the students that are struggling to try and get them the help they need. But I think part of the issue that we will have is that not everybody that needs it will take advantage of it. And I mean, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make it drink, the old phrasing.
Right.
But I mean, it's the online students, at least in the high school, that need this help. Are they going to come into school? They're online for a reason.
Well, and part of this has been, and the high school's already really started many of the support periods during the Wednesdays. And some of our online that we're not getting in the building, they're doing individual Zoom with those students to make sure that they're trying to provide as much support as they can. We have to offer what we can offer to support our students. When we're generating these lists right now, and I have a list from each building with particular student names, grade levels, as we're generating these lists, what we've been talking about is we're providing the Recovery Wednesdays. Students and families are either going to take advantage of that or they're not. It's like the choice that we had with our plan. If they don't take advantage of that, we move that list of students to our summer program. Now, we can't force them to come for the summer program, but we're going to offer it to them. And if we can get those students, and we're going to encourage those students and families to take advantage of those programs, it's free of charge. We're going to try to provide as much transportation as we can, but we can't force them there. Now, the high school might, because if they're failures, they're going to offer the opportunity not to go to A-Tech for summer school and pick up credit recovery and try to get that course that they failed completed, but they're going to offer it here. So you may have more students take advantage of that because they'll be in small groups, they can drive, they're not worried about the transportation. But that same group, Recovery Wednesdays, they take advantage. If they don't, summer school, they take advantage. If they don't, that same list of students is going to travel to the fall when we start offering our after-school programs. And again, we're going to push hard for those students to attend those after-school programs that we're going to offer, that our teachers are going to work outside their contractual day to provide. Again, in the areas of ELA and math, and if there's other areas that we need to address, we will. But again, just like any of our programs that we have offered, our plans that we've offered, every family, every student is going to be making a choice.
Well, I want to reiterate again that I appreciate the efforts that you put into putting these plans together. I think they're solid plans. They're out there to help our students and our families, and I personally would like to see the people that need to take advantage of this take advantage of it. Our school district, I think, in COVID has done the best job that they absolutely could. We had some growing pains last year. I think we've made so many efforts, leaps and bounds over last year on what we're offering our students. And I think this is important. And I think me talking to whoever's listening to encourage people to take advantage of these programs for their students so that they can get back on level with where they need to be, and we can combat COVID as we move into the next couple of school years. Thank you.
And we're hoping with, just to add one more comment, we're hoping with the smaller groups, maybe a group of 2 or 3 students that might be meeting with a teacher on a Wednesday, will be encouraging to families, even students that are online, will be encouraging to families, because to spread out 2 or 3 students when there's not large groups of students in the building, if there's still some fear of their student being there because of health concerns within the family or some other issue within that family structure, maybe they will see that there's a benefit of getting in and that there's even more safety precautions being put into place because there's going to be fewer students. It's not a regular school day, it's small groups. So we're hoping that's even an added incentive to bring students in.
Eric, I'm looking at incentives to have children come to these programs, and that is food. You know, as we know, we have a lot of our students that suffer from food insecurity. So do we know whether or not there's going to be like a farmers to families type program? Can we try to link in, you know, serving a meal, or maybe even giving them, you know, a couple meals or a meal to take home if they participate in the summer program?
Yeah, I have talked to Mrs. Jones in regards to food service. We haven't made a final decision. I know they're making some changes to what the summer will look like for food service, but we're still in conversations. I haven't checked with the Farmers to Family program. I know they intend to run that again, but I will get in touch with Barb Klingensmith just to see what's going to go on for this summer, if she can give me some information.
I'm just looking at whatever we can do to try to make it where it's like, oh, we're ruining our summer by having to go to school. Oh, you know. So if there's some other incentives that we can give to encourage persons to do this, I would love that. And we've done things in the past here with our elementary schools about having, you know, fun days, like activity days. Is that something, and I granted this is all COVID, you know, do we have the blessing of the governor to do this, but could we try to mix in something with, you know, fun, with maybe our Sergeant Major Arndt, you know, reading a book to kids, you know, just trying to do something here from what, because I'd listen to a book read by Sergeant Major Arndt every day of the week, okay? But, you know, can we do something like that here from which to try to generate, you know, some interests that maybe a student who may not think, oh, I don't care about reading, you know, maybe we could influence someone here from which to have a passion for reading and willing to take, you know, some time during their summer from which to share that passion.
Yeah, and we've talked a little bit about trying to offer some activities along with this. I think any way to incentivize the students coming, if there's a guest speaker, if there's maybe a you know, a wacky Wednesday where they get to do something special on that day or something, especially for the lower grade levels, that just makes the summer that much more enjoyable. So we'll look at some of those ideas.
A dunk tank for the superintendent.
There we go. I've done it before. Any other questions that I can answer? Okay, I still have, I tried to get through that really quickly, but I still have a couple other items. Mr. Dana, you had also asked, and I wanted to share this tonight, you had also asked about surveys, if we were surveying to see what some of the responses are from students, parents, staff, in about the amount of learning that has been impacted, technology, you know, how that's been a barrier, biggest gaps in learning for different subject areas, how classes have been which classes have been compromised due to the pandemic or maybe activities that they haven't been able to attend, types of supplemental programs that maybe would be helpful in our community, concerns for the students, PD, those kinds of things. We have surveyed, this is through that Geneva Academic Partnership. Right now, we had 276 grade 3 to 5 surveys returned. We had 505 grade 6 to 8 surveys returned. High school, we had 231 surveys returned. Parents, we had 126 surveys returned. Staff, we had 118 surveys returned. So we're, again, collecting that information. We will get more parent surveys because I'll be doing a robocall coming up, again, encouraging parents to go on and provide that information so we have that moving forward. The other part of my robocall, and I did share this with the board, but it was only through the email that I sent out to all Geneva users for our staff. We did have a change in our district schedule coming up this next week. I'll send out a robocall on Friday as a reminder. We've had it in the Gazette. We've had, I think there was information that was in the Star Beacon. We also put it on our website, and it's been out on the very different parent group Facebook pages and things like that. But we had a change in our calendar, and this is due to the second vaccination clinic that we have at Geneva High School. That vaccination clinic is going to take place on Thursday, March 25th, so next week. Due to the clinic and the high probability that we'll have many employees that might have some adverse reaction or become ill, and this is all when you look at over 170 employees that were vaccinated, there's likelihood that we will not be able to fill positions if we had many that were sick. So what we did is we made a change. We switched and made Wednesday, March 24th, a regular school day for all of our in-person students. So they didn't lose a day. We'll run our regular transportation, breakfast and lunch during that day. And then on Thursday, we're going to, instead of that being an in-person day, that will be a remote day. And that will also be the end of the third 9-week grading period. So many of the teachers are planning to make sure that their students are getting those final assignments in that need to be in prior to our spring break. And then the vaccination clinic will take place on that remote day when we have it. And then the Friday, there will be no school for students and staff. I am calling that a calamity day for Friday, March 26th. And again, the reasoning for that, after consulting with other school districts that have gone through their second vaccination, health department, medical professionals, it was just determined that the likelihood is we would have many that would be absent. So I thought it was prudent at that time to change the schedule around and make sure we accommodated for the staff that was going to be vaccinated. So I just want to make sure the board was aware of that. And that ends my other, unless there's other questions.
Everybody else done? I have another.
Okay.
This is a statement, I really don't expect any discussion. And I'd like to state for the record that I do not support the GAP or Geneva Academic Partnership Initiative in its current setup. Nor did I have any knowledge of the survey that was sent out until after it was sent. I initially heard about the GAP initiative during a public portion of, I believe, our December Board of Education meeting. We were briefed that our superintendent and one board member received a call from the city of Geneva indicating the city, local businesses, and surrounding municipalities were interested in creating the Geneva Academic Partnership Initiative. After hearing this for the first time, I questioned who from the city had called, and one was informed it was one member of the Geneva City Council. The following morning, I visited Geneva Township office to speak with the township trustee. I was informed that they were contacted and they indicated they would not be involved. They also indicated the request had nothing to do with the daily operations of running a municipality. Their thoughts were the initiative should remain school business. I immediately left there and I contacted a member of Geneva City Council. He also informed me he received an email about GAP and replied trying to convince the sender it was not city business and that he would not be involved in it. He also informed me that the GAP initiative had never been presented to the city council, nor presented for discussion of any type. A few days later, we were provided a copy of the minutes from the first GAP meeting between interested parties. I again called the member on council, who once again informed me he had not heard about this meeting and it had not been presented to the council yet. He called me back the very same day to inform me that the city manager had not heard about GAP at that point. He also informed me that because of this, he had pulled himself off of the council service committee, which is where the initiative would go once it was discussed at council, if it was. Many of you will recall, while we were developing our strategic plan, we assembled several groups comprised of citizens, with each group being assigned a member of our district for oversight. During this time, one of those groups sent a highly controversial survey with questionable content to all middle and high school students along with their parents. We were finally able to get the survey pulled, but not before it created a hailstorm of complaints. The questions included in the survey were not appropriate for school-aged children, nor their families. This happened even though there was supposed to be administrative oversight, which failed. The same individual who our superintendent informed us sent out the inappropriate and questionable survey is the same individual heading the Geneva, the GAP initiative. We have already been embarrassed once, causing us to go into reaction mode or crisis management, if you will, even though we had oversight in place, which failed. Therefore, I believe in order to keep the best interest of our students, their families, and our employees at the forefront of what we do, we should not be involved with the GAP initiative. I will add, many noble initiatives have failed due to individuals who were involved. Our school district is comprised of a dedicated and highly motivated group of professionals who are preparing our students to enter the adult world, where many will become leaders in the corporate and government sector. We should ensure they remain free from outside distractions. I would approach this with a completely different mindset if it was our initiative, meaning our educational experts, the people that we pay to teach our students, stood up and were requesting help because they couldn't handle the duties, but that's not what happened. This is outside clutter coming in. So for those reasons, I do not support the Geneva Academic Partnership Initiative. Thank you.
So anyone else? Okay, it's time for our second hearing of the public. Once again, if you do have something you would like to say, please start by stating your name and your address. Okay, I recommend that the board hold an executive session to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official, and preparing for, conducting, or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment.
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Dana?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler?
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz? And Mr. Arndt?
Yes?
Okay, we will be going into executive session. There will be no action. and we will not be returning to general session this evening.
Did
Thank
you want
you.
a few minutes?
Hmm?
Did you